December 18th, 1965. 3,000 feet above Thanh Hoa Province, North Vietnam. Lieutenant Commander James Stockdale banks his A-4 Skyhawk hard to starboard, the G-forces pressing him deep into his seat as the jungle canopy blurs beneath him. The morning sun glints off the Red River snaking through the valley below, and for a brief moment, everything seems almost peaceful. Then the radio crackles to life. AAA, 11 o'clock. And the sky erupts. Black puffs of flak blossom around his aircraft like deadly flowers. Stockdale drops lower, pushing the Skyhawk down to 2,500 feet, then 2,000. The briefing was clear. Get below the radar-guided guns, hit the bridge, get out. Simple, except nothing about North Vietnam is simple. He lines up his approach, the Thanh Hoa Bridge growing larger in his windscreen. This is his third mission against the structure the pilots have started calling the Dragon's Jaw, a massive steel and concrete span that refuses to fall despite everything they throw at it. His finger hovers over the bomb release when he sees them. People, hundreds of them scattered across the rice paddies below. Not running for cover, not hiding, standing there with rifles pointed skyward. "What the hell are they doing?" His wingman's voice crackles through the headset. Before Stockdale can respond, he hears it, a sound like hail on a tin roof, sharp and metallic. Tink, 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 rounds punching through aluminum skin. His instruments flicker. The hydraulic pressure gauge drops, not from a surface-to-air missile, not from sophisticated anti-aircraft artillery, from farmers with rifles. He releases his bombs, 2,000 pounds of high explosive that will add yet another scar to the Dragon's Jaw without bringing it down, and pulls up hard. The stick feels mushy in his hands. Hydraulic fluid is streaming from somewhere behind him, leaving a dark trail in the blue sky. One of those peasants with their primitive weapons just put a bullet exactly where it needed to be, to cripple a $4 million attack jet. The Skyhawk shudders. Stockdale coaxes her north toward the Gulf of Tonkin, every mile an eternity. He makes it back to the carrier, but the aircraft is done. The maintenance chief will later show him the hole, a single 7.62mm round that punched through the hydraulic line with surgical precision. "Golden BB," the chief says, shaking his head. "One bullet in a million that hits exactly the wrong spot. Or the right spot, depending on whose side you're on." 6 months earlier, the Pentagon, Washington, D.C., Colonel Robin Olds sits in a briefing room that smells like burnt coffee and old cigarette smoke, watching intelligence officers point at grainy photographs of North Vietnam projected on a screen. The officers are talking about SAM sites and MiG bases, about radar installations and petroleum storage facilities, sophisticated threats requiring sophisticated responses. What they're not talking about are rifles. Olds, a World War II ace with 12 kills to his name, shifts in his uncomfortable chair. He's heard rumors from the Navy pilots who've been flying missions off the carriers, stories about aircraft coming back looking like Swiss cheese, riddled with small arms fire. But the Air Force is confident. The Air Force has F-105 Thunderchiefs that can fly faster than the speed of sound. The Air Force has precision weapons and advanced avionics. What's a farmer with a rifle going to do against that? The intelligence officer changes slides. "Enemy air defenses are concentrated around key strategic targets," he drones. "We anticipate losses primarily from radar-guided systems and fighter interception." Olds notices something in one of the photographs, clusters of people in the field surrounding a target, dark dots that could be anything. He almost asks about it, then doesn't. The briefing moves on. 3 months from now, Olds will be in the cockpit of an F-4 Phantom over North Vietnam, and he'll understand what those dark dots were. 3 months from now, he'll watch tracer fire rise from the ground like strings of deadly pearls, and he'll realize that the biggest threat to American air superiority isn't always the most technologically advanced one. March 1966. A village near Haiphong, North Vietnam. Nguyen Van Bai is 53 years old, a rice farmer who has never been more than 30 kilometers from the village where he was born. His hands are calloused from decades of working the paddies, his back bent from years of planting and harvesting. He owns precisely 3 things of value: a water buffalo, a French-made Lebel rifle from 1918, and 27 rounds of ammunition. Tonight, the village chief has called a meeting in the community house. Oil lamps cast flickering shadows on the walls as nearly 200 villagers crowd inside. The air is thick with humidity and anticipation. A young man in a crisp uniform, an officer from the People's Army, stands before them with a chalkboard. "The Americans believe they can bomb us into submission," the officer says, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "They believe their technology makes them invincible. They are wrong." He draws a simple diagram on the board, an aircraft in profile with arrows pointing to various parts of the fuselage. An airplane is a complicated machine: fuel lines, hydraulic systems, control cables, engines with turbine blades spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. A single bullet in the right place can bring down a plane that costs more than our entire village will earn in 100 years. Nguyen Van Bay leans forward. He has seen the American jets, silver streaks that tear across the sky faster than sound, leaving white contrails like chalk marks against the blue. The idea that his old rifle could touch such machines seems absurd, the officer continues. "You will not aim directly at the aircraft. The mathematics instructor will explain." He gestures to an elderly man wearing thick glasses, the village schoolteacher who fought the French at Dien Bien Phu. The teacher stands, picks up a piece of chalk. "The aircraft moves at perhaps 300 meters per second. Your bullet travels at perhaps 800 meters per second. By the time your bullet reaches where the aircraft has moved. You must lead the target." He draws vectors on the board, angles and trajectories. Most of the villagers cannot read, but they understand angles. They understand leading a target. Every hunter in the village has learned to shoot ahead of a running deer. "When the alarm sounds," the officer says, "everyone with a weapon goes to their assigned position. You will fire in volleys, on command, not to hit one specific aircraft, but to fill the sky with bullets. Create a wall of lead that the Americans must fly through." Nguyen Van Bay raises his hand. "How will we know when they are coming?" "Spotters," the officer replies. "At the first sound of engines, they will ring the alarm. You will have perhaps 2 minutes to reach your position. The Americans fly fast, but they must fly low to hit their targets accurately. When they do," he makes a sweeping gesture with his arm, mimicking firing skyward, "we make them pay for every meter of altitude they surrender." After the meeting, Nguyen Van Bay walks home under a sky brilliant with stars. His wife is waiting, anxiety creasing her face. "They are asking farmers to shoot down airplanes," she says. "This is madness." He sets the old level rifle on the table, runs his fingers along the worn wood stock. "Perhaps," he says, "but it is our madness, our sky." April 1966, Da Nang Air Base, South Vietnam. Captain Frank Tullow sits on the wing of his F-4 Phantom watching the sun set over the South China Sea. His crew chief is below, documenting damage to the aircraft's underside, 47 holes ranging from pinprick punctures to a tear the size of a fist in the port stabilizer. 47, the crew chief says, shaking his head. "And you didn't even take a SAM hit?" "Small arms," Tullow replies, lighting a cigarette with hands that still shake slightly. "Flew through a valley, north of Vinh. Must have been 1,000 people down there, all shooting straight up." He had been briefed about the SAM sites, about the MiG bases, about the sophisticated air defense network the Soviets had helped North Vietnam construct. Nobody had briefed him about entire villages turning into impromptu anti-aircraft batteries. The crew chief climbs up beside him, looks at the bullet holes clustered around the hydraulic bay. "Couple inches to the left and you'd have lost your flight controls. You know what the odds are of a random bullet hitting that exact spot?" "Astronomical," Tullow says, "except when there's 1,000 random bullets." That's the thing nobody explained in training. One farmer with one rifle is no threat to a supersonic jet, but 100 farmers with 100 rifles all firing at the same patch of sky? That's 100 chances for a golden BB. 1,000 farmers? 1,000 chances. "They're learning," Tullow says, more to himself than to the crew chief. "First few weeks, they just blaze away randomly. Now they're organized, firing in volleys. Somebody's teaching them to lead the target, to aim for the likely flight path instead of where the aircraft is." The crew chief pulls a flattened bullet from his pocket, holds it up to the dying light. "Found this one embedded in the armor plate behind your seat. Looks like a 7.62 meter. Russian, maybe Chinese, could have come from anything. An AK-47, a SKS, a machine gun, even an old Mosin-Nagant." Tullow takes the bullet, turns it over in his fingers. This small piece of metal, probably fired by someone who had never flown in an airplane, had come within inches of ending his life. The technology gap between his $4 million fighter and the weapon that fired this bullet was measured in decades. And yet, here he was, alive only because of where he'd chosen to put his armor plate. "How many sorties you got left on this tour?" the crew chief asks. 73. "Better start flying higher." Tullo looks at the bullet again, then hands it back. "Can't hit the target from high altitude, and if we can't hit the target, we have to come back again, and again, and again." May 1966, Hanoi, North Vietnam. General Vo Nguyen Giap stands before a large map of North Vietnam, red pins marking every confirmed aircraft downing. His staff officers cluster around the table, their faces illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. Outside, the sound of air raid sirens wails through the humid night, another American strike package inbound. "Gentlemen," Giap says, his finger tracing a line along Route 1, "the Americans have superior aircraft, superior training, superior technology. They expect this war to be won in the sky. We will teach them that wars are won on the ground, even aerial wars." A younger officer, fresh from training in Moscow, shifts uncomfortably. "General, our SAM batteries have proven effective, but we have only 30 operational sites. The Americans fly hundreds of sorties per day. The mathematics, Giap interrupts, his voice sharp, "favor those who understand them correctly. Colonel Dang, present your findings." Colonel Dang Van Quang, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, spreads a series of charts across the table. "We have analyzed all American aircraft losses in the past 90 days. SAM sites account for 18%, MiG interceptors 11%, traditional anti-aircraft artillery 23%. He pauses, letting the numbers sink in. Small arms fire, rifles, machine guns, weapons fired by militia forces, accounts for 48%. The room falls silent. The young officer from Moscow looks stunned. "Nearly half," Giap says, a thin smile crossing his face. "And do you know why, comrades? Because the Americans cannot bomb every village, cannot destroy every rifle, cannot kill every farmer who knows how to point a weapon at the sky." Dang continues, pointing to a diagram showing aircraft silhouettes at various altitudes. "American doctrine requires low-altitude attack runs for accuracy. The F-105, their primary strike aircraft, must descend below 5,000 feet to effectively deliver ordnance on point targets. At this altitude, they are vulnerable. Even the most advanced aircraft," another officer adds, "has critical systems exposed. Fuel lines, hydraulic systems, control surfaces. The Americans armor their cockpits and engines, but they cannot armor everything. The aircraft would be too heavy to fly." Giap nods. "We have 3 million rifles in this country. If every rifle has even a 1 in 10,000 chance of bringing down an aircraft, and if a single aircraft flies through fire from 1,000 rifles..." He doesn't finish the sentence. The mathematics are clear enough. "The American pilots call it the golden BB," Dang says. "They treat it as random chance, bad luck. But there is no such thing as luck when you fire enough bullets. It becomes probability, statistics, inevitability." Outside, the air raid sirens reach their crescendo, then fall silent. Somewhere in the city, air defense batteries open up, the deep boom of 57mm guns, the staccato crack of smaller weapons, and underneath it all, barely audible, the snap-crack-pop of rifle fire, hundreds of individual shots blending into a continuous roar. "The Americans have computers that can calculate bombing solutions," Giap says. "We have something better. We have every person in this country willing to point a weapon at the sky. Every village a fortress, every farmer a soldier. The Americans will learn what the French learned. Technology means nothing without the will to use it indefinitely, and we will outlast them." June 1966, 2,000 feet above Phu Quyen Airfield, North Vietnam. Major James Kassler's F-105 Thunderchief shudders as he rolls in on the target, the airfield's runway stretching out below like a gray ribbon. This is his 86th mission over North Vietnam, and he knows the dance by heart now. Dive through the flak, pickle the bombs, pull up hard before the ground reaches up to grab you. What he doesn't expect is the sound. It starts as a distant popping, like firecrackers at a 4th of July celebration. Then it grows louder, closer, until it sounds like he's flying through a hailstorm made of hornets. The Thunderchiefs' fuselage rings with impacts, ting, 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 crack. Each strike a potential catastrophe. His heads-up display flickers. Warning lights illuminate across the instrument panel like a malevolent Christmas tree. Hydraulic pressure dropping, fuel flow irregular. The stick goes mushy in his hands. "Leads hit!" he calls over the radio, his voice steady despite the controlled chaos erupting around him. "Taking fire, multiple hits." He cranes his neck, looking down and behind. The ground below is alive with muzzle flashes. Not from anti-aircraft guns, but from rifles. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all pointed at the narrow corridor of sky his strike package must fly through. The North Vietnamese have turned the approach to the airfield into a gauntlet of lead. A voice in his headset, "Cobalt lead, this is Cobalt 3. I see smoke from your aircraft." Kasler checks his mirrors. Sure enough, a thin trail of dark smoke streams from somewhere behind his cockpit. The fuel flow gauge is definitely dropping now. One of those rifles, fired by someone who probably couldn't hit a barn door at 50 yards under normal circumstances, has punched a hole in his fuel tank. He does the math in his head. Fuel consumption rate, distance to the tanker track over Laos, altitude needed to glide if the engine quits. The numbers don't look good. "Cobalt flight, this is lead. Proceeding to the tanker. 3, you have the lead." He noses the Thunderchief westward, climbing gently to conserve fuel. Each minute feels like an hour. The engine continues running so far, but the fuel gauge keeps dropping faster than it should. Behind him, his wingmen continue the attack, and he can hear the mission continuing over the radio. Professional, methodical, as if people on the ground aren't trying to kill them with weapons that belonged in a museum. 20 minutes later, he's close enough to see the KC-135 tanker orbiting over the Laotian highlands. The fuel gauge reads nearly empty. His hands are slick with sweat inside his flight gloves. "Texaco 27, Cobalt lead. Emergency refueling, I'm running on fumes." "Roger, Cobalt lead. Come on in. The basket's waiting." The refueling boom extends, the drogue basket trailing behind the tanker like a target. Kasler eases the Thunderchief forward, trying to ignore the warning lights, the fluctuating gauges, the smoke still trailing from his aircraft. The probe on his aircraft's nose slides into the basket on the 3rd try. Not his best work, but good enough. Fuel flows. The gauge needle creeps upward. Kasler lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Texaco, Cobalt lead. You just saved my ass." "All part of the service, Cobalt. What hit you?" "Small arms. Rifle fire." There's a pause. "Say again? Did you say rifles?" "Affirmative. Flew through what must have been a whole village worth of people shooting at us." Another pause, longer this time. "Roger that. We've been hearing stories. Didn't quite believe them." Kasler watches his fuel gauge climb back into the safe zone. In a few minutes, he'll disconnect and limp back to base. The maintenance crews will count the holes, he's guessing somewhere north of 60. They'll patch the fuel tank, replace damaged hydraulic lines, maybe swap out some control surfaces, and tomorrow he'll climb back into a cockpit and do it all over again. Because that's the mission. That's the war. July 1966, Thanh Hoa Province, North Vietnam. 17-year-old Pham Thi Lu crouches in a spider hole at the edge of the rice paddy, her SKS carbine resting across her knees. The morning sun is already brutal, turning the flooded paddy into a mirror that reflects the cloudless sky. Somewhere in that perfect blue expanse, the Americans will come. She is one of 43 defenders assigned to this sector, a 2-kilometer stretch of valley that American aircraft must traverse to reach the railway bridge at Thanh Hoa. Most of the defenders are women and old men. The young men have gone south to fight, or north to man the heavy anti-aircraft guns around Hanoi. What remains is everyone else, armed with whatever weapons the People's Army could spare. The alarm sounds, not a siren, but the rapid clanging of a bell from the village temple. The spotters have seen them coming. Lu scrambles out of the spider hole and runs to her assigned position, a small earthen berm that offers protection from shrapnel, but nothing from a direct hit. Around her, the other defenders emerge from hiding places scattered throughout the paddies, behind dikes, in tree lines, beneath camouflage netting stretched over bamboo frames. She can hear them now, a distant thunder that grows rapidly louder. Then she sees them, 4 silver shapes streaking across the sky from the northeast, flying in a loose formation. F-105. Thunderchiefs, the kind the villagers call thunder dragons. The village commander, a one-armed veteran who lost his limb to a French artillery shell 15 years ago, stands atop a small platform, a red flag in his remaining hand. "Steady!" he shouts. "Wait for the command!" The jets grow larger, lower. Lou can see details now, the swept wings, the bulging fuselage, the ordnance hanging beneath. She estimates the altitude at perhaps 2,500 meters and dropping. Her hands tighten on the SKS. "Aim high!" the commander bellows. 300 meters ahead of the aircraft, on my mark!" Lou raises the rifle, sighting along the barrel at a point in the sky where the lead aircraft will be in 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Fire! The world explodes into sound. 43 weapons firing simultaneously, rifles, carbines, a few machine guns, creating a continuous roar that drowns out even the jet engines. Lou squeezes the trigger again and again, working the rifle's action in a steady rhythm. Fire, cycle the bolt, fire, cycle the bolt. The brass casings arc through the air, glinting in the sunlight before splashing into the paddy water. She doesn't aim at the aircraft themselves anymore. She aims at the sky ahead of them, trusting the training, trusting the mathematics. 10 rounds. 20. The magazine runs dry and she drops it, snatches a fresh one from the bandolier across her chest, slams it home. The lead Thunder Chief flashes overhead, so low she can see the pilot's helmet in the cockpit. Then the second. The third seems to hesitate, to wobble slightly, but it continues on. The fourth aircraft's engine coughs. A puff of black smoke trails from the fuselage, then becomes a steady stream. The Thunder Chief's nose drops slightly, the pilot obviously fighting for control. "Keep firing!" the commander shouts, though the aircraft are already past, racing toward the bridge. Lou empties the second magazine at the fourth aircraft's tail, leading it, aiming for where it will be. Around her, the other defenders do the same. The sky behind the jets fills with tracer rounds, 1 in every 5 bullets loaded with phosphorus to mark the trajectory. It looks like fireworks, like strings of red pearls reaching upward. The fourth Thunder Chief drops lower, trailing more smoke. Then, perhaps 3 kilometers away, she sees it, a tiny figure rocketing upward on a pillar of fire. The pilot has ejected. Seconds later, the aircraft itself plows into the jungle, a ball of orange flame erupting from the tree line. The defenders don't cheer. There's no time. Already the alarm is sounding again, a second wave incoming, probably coming to suppress the defenses and rescue the downed pilot. Lou reloads, her hands moving automatically now. Her shoulder aches from the rifle's recoil. Her ears ring from the gunfire. Her eyes water from the gun smoke that hangs in the humid air. But she smiles, because somewhere in that valley, an American pilot is discovering that his $1,000,000 aircraft is no match for a 17-year-old girl with a rifle and the will to use it. July 1966, Korat Royal Thai Air Force Base, Thailand. Major Leo Thorsness stands in the debriefing room, his flight suit still dark with sweat, and watches the intelligence officer mark another red X on the map of North Vietnam. The X represents Captain Mike Breselton's F-105, shot down over Thanh Hoa province this morning. Breselton is alive. They picked him up before the North Vietnamese could get to him. But his aircraft is gone. $8 million worth of American engineering scattered across a Vietnamese jungle. "Small arms," the intelligence officer says, tapping his pointer against the map. Brazelton reported taking hits from ground fire approximately here 40 seconds before his engine failed. No SAM launches detected, no anti-aircraft artillery in the immediate area, just rifles and machine guns. "Just rifles," someone mutters from the back of the room. There's bitter laughter. Thorsness knows what they're thinking. They're all thinking it. They've been trained to fight the Soviet Union, to penetrate sophisticated air defense networks, to evade radar-guided missiles and supersonic interceptors. Nobody trained them to fight farmers. "Gentlemen," the intelligence officer continues, "we're seeing a pattern emerge. The North Vietnamese have organized their civilian population into a distributed air defense network. Every village along the major approach routes has been armed and trained. They fire in coordinated volleys, creating a wall of lead that our aircraft must fly through." He clicks to the next slide, a photograph of a captured North Vietnamese training manual. They're teaching basic deflection shooting, how to lead a moving target. They're positioning their militia forces along predictable flight paths, and they're learning our tactics. Another slide, a graph showing aircraft losses over time broken down by cause. The line for small arms fire trends steadily upward. The statistical probability of taking a critical hit from small arms fire increases exponentially with the number of weapons firing at you, the intelligence officer explains. If you fly through fire from 1,000 rifles, you're facing 1,000 individual chances for a catastrophic hit. The North Vietnamese understand this. They're weaponizing probability. Thorsness raises his hand. So, what's the solution? Fly higher? Fly higher and you lose accuracy. You also become more vulnerable to SAMs. The SA-2 is optimized for high-altitude targets. Fly lower? Fly lower, and you fly into heavier concentrations of small arms fire. So we're damned either way. The intelligence officer nods slowly. Welcome to Vietnam, gentlemen. After the briefing, Thorsness walks out to the flight line where his F-105, nicknamed Panda Bear, sits in the harsh sunlight. The crew chief is on a ladder inspecting a line of bullet holes that stitch across the vertical stabilizer like a zipper. How many? Thorsness asks. 17 in the tail section alone, plus another dozen in the fuselage. You got lucky. Nothing critical hit. Lucky. Thorsness considers the word. Brazelton had been lucky too until he wasn't. That's what the golden BB phenomenon came down to. Luck, stretched across enough missions until the statistics caught up with you. Every sortie was a roll of the dice, and the North Vietnamese kept adding more dice to the cup. Chief, Thorsness says, I want extra armor plate installed. Around the hydraulic lines, the fuel system, anywhere critical. Sir, that'll add weight. Cut into your performance. Better slow and alive than fast and dead. The crew chief nods, makes a note on his clipboard. You got it, Major. But you know what they say about the golden BB? What's that? Doesn't matter how much armor you wear, there's always one bullet with your name on it and one without your name that's addressed to whom it may concern. September 1966, above the Red River Valley, North Vietnam. Captain John Dramesi pushes his F-105 into a steep dive, the G-forces crushing him into his seat as the ground rushes up to meet him. His target, a bridge spanning the Red River, is marked by the smoke from the previous flight's bombs. Black clouds blossom around his aircraft as the anti-aircraft guns find their range. But it's not the flak that worries him most anymore. He's learned to watch the ground itself to scan for the telltale signs of militia positions. Clusters of fighters in the tree lines, muzzle flashes from the rice paddies, the distinctive pattern of tracer fire rising in coordinated volleys rather than scattered shots. The North Vietnamese have become terrifyingly efficient. Cadillac lead is in hot, he calls over the radio, steadying his aircraft for the bomb run. The altimeter unwinds. 8,000 feet, 6,000 feet, 4,000 feet. This is the danger zone, low enough for accuracy, but high enough that he's hanging in the sky like a target on a shooting gallery. He can see them now, dozens of figures emerging from concealment, rifles raised. The first impacts sound like gravel thrown against a car door. Then heavier hits, sharp cracks that make the aircraft shudder. Warning lights flicker on his panel. Not yet, not yet. He needs to get closer. 3,000 feet. The bridge fills his gun sight. His finger hovers over the bomb release. Then something explodes behind him. Not a detonation, but the catastrophic failure of pressurized hydraulics spraying into hot metal. The stick goes dead in his hands. The F-105 lurches violently to the left, rolling into an uncommanded bank. Lead is hit. I've lost. The aircraft inverts. The world becomes a spinning chaos of sky-ground, sky-ground. Dramesi's training takes over. Left hand to the ejection handle between his legs, right hand to the face curtain above his head. Pull both simultaneously, the canopy explodes away. The ejection seat fires a violent kick that feels like being hit by a truck. Then he's tumbling through the air, watching his F-105, still carrying its bomb load, spiral into the river below in a fountain of white water. The parachute deploys with a bone-jarring snap. Suddenly everything is quiet except for the wind and the distant sound of jet engines as his wingmen circle overhead. Dramesi looks down. He's descending toward a village, and already he can see people running toward his projected landing point. He reaches for his survival radio, keys the transmit button. Cadillac flight, lead is on the chute. I'm coming down in a hot area. Recommend. Gunfire erupts from below. He feels the parachute jerk as rounds punch through the canopy. One of the bullets cracks past his head close enough that he feels the displacement of air. They're shooting at him while he hangs defenseless in the sky, and there's not a damn thing he can do about it. He hits the ground hard, rolls, comes up fighting to unbuckle the parachute harness. Figures are running toward him from 3 directions, militia, farmers, whoever. He gets one hand on his survival pistol before they're on him, and then everything dissolves into fists and rifle butts and shouting voices. The last thing he sees before someone strikes him across the temple is his F-105's tail section protruding from the river, water boiling around it. $8 million, brought down by a bullet that probably cost 5 cents. October 1966. Hoa Lo Prison, Hanoi, Hanoi Hilton. Dramesi sits on the concrete floor of his cell, his back against the wall, and listens to the sound of bombing in the distance. The Americans are hitting targets around Hanoi again, and he finds himself involuntarily analyzing the pattern of explosions, trying to determine what they're striking. Old habits. The prison is full now. 43 American airmen at last count, all shot down over North Vietnam. Some hit by SAMs, some by anti-aircraft fire. Many, like Dramesi, brought down by small arms. In the evenings, when the guards aren't paying attention, the prisoners tap messages to each other through the walls using a code based on a 5x5 letter grid. Tonight, the taps come from the cell next door. New prisoner brought in yesterday. Dramesi decodes the message. F4, shot down near Haiphong, ground fire, both engines failed. He taps back. How many hits? Don't know. Too many. Farmer with AK. There's a long pause, then more taps. $4 million airplane, $30 rifle. We're losing. Dramesi doesn't respond. What is there to say? He's had 2 months to think about it. 2 months in this cell, replaying that mission over and over in his mind, every tactical decision, every altitude choice, every approach angle, trying to find the moment where he could have done something differently. The truth is there was nothing. The North Vietnamese had learned to make every meter of airspace cost something. Fly high, face the SAMs. Fly low, face the guns. Fly anywhere in between, face the rifles. It was a 3-dimensional battlefield with no safe space, and the enemy had infinite patience and seemingly infinite ammunition. A guard's footsteps echo in the corridor. The tapping stops. Dramesi closes his eyes and listens to the distant thunder of American bombs falling on North Vietnam, delivered by pilots who are learning, or failing to learn, the same lessons he learned. November 1966. Tak Ly Royal Thai Air Force Base, Thailand. Colonel Robin Olds, the same man who sat in that Pentagon briefing room 18 months ago, stands before his assembled squadron, the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. Every pilot in the room has flown combat missions over North Vietnam. Every one of them knows what they're facing. Gentlemen, Olds says, his voice carrying across the briefing room, we've lost 37 aircraft in the past 90 days, 13 to SAMs, 8 to MiGs, 16 to ground fire, and I'm including both anti-aircraft artillery and small arms in that category. He lets the numbers sink in. 16 aircraft, 16 pilots, some rescued, some captured, some dead. All brought down by weapons fired by people who would have trouble hitting a stationary target at 100 yards under peacetime conditions. The North Vietnamese have turned their entire country into a weapon system, Olds continues. Every village is a fortress, every farmer is a soldier. They've trained their civilian population to fire coordinated volleys, to lead their targets, to concentrate fire on likely approach routes, and it's working. He points to a map of North Vietnam marked with flight paths and threat rings. We've been flying predictable routes. Same approach corridors, same egress paths, same altitudes. The enemy has learned our patterns and they're prepositioning their forces along those patterns. A hand goes up. Sir, what's the solution? Variation, Olds replies. We change our tactics every mission, different approaches, different altitudes, different times of day. We stop being predictable. We also start taking the small arms threat seriously as we take SAMs. Another hand. How do we do that, sir? We can't shoot back at every farmer with a rifle. No, but we can avoid concentrating our aircraft in vulnerable positions. We can use terrain masking. We can employ wild weasel flights to suppress air defenses before the strike package arrives, and most importantly, we can stop thinking of rifles as a minor nuisance and start treating them as a legitimate threat. Olds walks to the front of the room, his expression grim. The North Vietnamese have weaponized probability. Every rifle pointed at the sky is a lottery ticket, and they're buying millions of tickets. Eventually, somebody wins the lottery. Our job is to reduce those odds any way we can. He pauses, looks at each pilot in turn. I won't lie to you. Some of you won't come home from this war. Some of you will end up in the Hanoi Hilton. Some of you will die in the jungle. But we owe it to each other and to the men we've already lost to be smarter than the enemy, to adapt faster, to learn from every mission. After the briefing, as the pilots file out, one young lieutenant approaches Olds. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. It just seems wrong somehow. That we can put a man on the moon, but we can't stop farmers with rifles from shooting down our aircraft. Olds considers this for a moment. Son, technology isn't everything. The North Vietnamese understand something we're still learning. Wars aren't won by the side with the best weapons. They're won by the side that uses their weapons most effectively. Right now, they're using their weapons, all their weapons, including those rifles, better than we're using ours. January 1967, Phuc Yen Airfield, North Vietnam. Senior Lieutenant Nguyen Van Trong stands beside his MiG-21, watching American F-105s being escorted back toward the border by their fighter cover. The jets leave white contrails across the morning sky, elegant and deadly. He has shot down 2 American aircraft in his brief career as a fighter pilot, both in aerial combat, both clean kills with missiles. He considers himself a professional, but today he's witnessing something different. From his vantage point at the airfield, he can see the valley to the south, a corridor the Americans must fly through to reach the airfield. As the next wave of F-105s approaches, the valley seems to come alive. Thousands of muzzle flashes sparkle in the morning light like fireflies. Tracer rounds rise in coordinated streams, creating a curtain of red-hot metal between earth and sky. The lead Thunderchief flies straight into the barrage. For a moment, nothing happens. The aircraft continues on its attack run, seemingly invincible. Then smoke trails from the engine. The jet wobbles, drops, struggles to maintain altitude. The pilot keeps coming, releases his bombs over the airfield. They explode harmlessly in an empty revetment, then turns for the border, losing altitude with every kilometer. Will he make it? Asks Captain Pham, Trong's wingman, standing beside him. No, Trong says simply. He's seen this too many times before. The aircraft is bleeding speed and altitude, the engine guttering. The pilot is trying to stretch his glide, trying to make it to Laos, to the rescue helicopters that orbit just across the border. But mathematics is against him. The F-105 disappears behind a ridgeline still heading west. 3 minutes later, they see the smoke plume rising. Rifles, Pham says, shaking his head. The Americans build aircraft that can fly at twice the speed of sound, and we bring them down with weapons from the Second World War. Trong watches the smoke rise into the clear sky. They have to fly low to hit their targets. When they fly low, they enter our world. And in our world, numbers matter more than technology. A jeep races across the airfield, carrying an officer from the command post. The man jumps out, saluting. Comrade Senior Lieutenant, you're to scramble immediately. More Americans inbound, high altitude this time. Trong nods, turning to his aircraft. This is his realm, high-altitude interception, missile combat, the clean geometry of aerial warfare. But even as he climbs into his cockpit, he knows the truth. He might shoot down 2 aircraft today, maybe 3 if fortune favors him. Meanwhile, in the valleys below, the militia will fire millions of rounds and bring down a dozen more. The high-technology war and the low-technology war fighting side by side. And both, in their own way, are winning. March 1967, USS Kitty Hawk, Gulf of Tonkin. Commander James Stockdale, the same pilot who discovered the golden BB phenomenon 15 months earlier, sits in the ready room, studying reconnaissance photographs of targets around Hanoi. He's flown 184 combat missions now, more than any other pilot in his squadron. He's also the most superstitious, wearing the same flight suit on every mission, following the same pre-flight routine, touching the same part of his aircraft before climbing the ladder. Because at this point, he knows that survival is primarily about luck. Skill matters, experience matters, but in the end, it comes down to whether your aircraft is in the wrong place when that one bullet, That golden BB is in the right place. "Skipper," his wingman says, dropping into the chair beside him. "Did you hear about Denton?" Commander Jeremiah Denton, another squadron leader. Stockdale nods slowly. "Shot down yesterday. Ground fire near Than Hoa. 37 holes in his aircraft before the engine quit. 37. The maintenance guys said any one of them could have missed a critical system, but number 37 hit the fuel control unit. One bullet out of who knows how many fired at him." Stockdale sets down the photographs. "You know what's changed in the last year? It's not the SAMs. We've learned to deal with those. It's not the MiGs. We can handle them. It's the ground fire. The North Vietnamese have trained every person in their country to be part of their air defense network. We're not fighting an air force anymore. We're fighting an entire nation. So, what do? We fly the mission, same as we always do. We just understand that every time we cross the coast, we're playing Russian roulette. Most times the chamber is empty. Sometimes it's not." That afternoon, Stockdale leads a strike against a bridge complex near Hanoi. The mission brief shows expected threats: SAM sites, anti-aircraft artillery, possible MiG activity. What it doesn't show, because it can't possibly show, is the 10,000 rifles that will point at the sky when they arrive. The strike package crosses the coast at 20,000 feet, then descends to attack altitude. Stockdale can see the bridge ahead, a dark line across the brown water. He can also see the ground fire beginning, first the heavy flak, then the lighter weapons, then the small arms fire creating a haze of tracer rounds. "Music flight. This is lead. Stay high on the pull-off. Don't get slow down low." He rolls in, steepening his dive. The bridge grows in his windscreen. Around him, the sky fills with the evidence of people trying to kill him. Black puffs of flak, red streamers of tracers, the occasional bright flash of a near miss. He pickles his bombs, pulls hard on the stick. The F-4 Phantom protests, shuddering as it transitions from dive to climb. Warning lights flicker, hydraulic pressure dropping. Again. He's taken hits, but nothing critical. Not yet. Lead is off target, egressing west. He climbs through 10,000 feet, watching the ground recede. Behind him, the rest of Music Flight executes their attacks, professional and precise. All aircraft check in as they reform into formation, heading for the safety of the Gulf, all except Music 4. "Music Lead, this is 4. I've got problems, multiple systems failures, I'm not going to make it." Stockdale looks back, sees the smoke trailing from his wingman's aircraft. "Music 4, what's your fuel state?" "Enough to make louse if I can keep this bird flying, but I'm losing hydraulics fast." "Roger 4, we'll escort you out. Music Flight, close up on 4, keep him in sight." They fly west in formation, nursing the damaged F-4 toward the border. Every mile feels like a victory. They cross the Red River, the unofficial boundary between life and death. They cross the mountains. Laos appears below, safe territory, rescue helicopters on standby. Music 4's engine coughs, begins streaming heavier smoke. The aircraft descends involuntarily. "I'm punching out," Music 4 calls, his voice calm. "Thanks for the escort, Lead." 2 seats fire from the stricken aircraft, pilot and RIO, separating in the air as their parachutes deploy. The F-4 flies on for a few more seconds, pilotless, then noses over and disappears into the jungle canopy. Stockdale circles overhead while the rescue helicopters move in. Both men are recovered safely within 20 minutes. A successful rescue. Another aircraft lost to ground fire, the 47th in the past 4 months. That evening, back in his stateroom, Stockdale makes an entry in his personal log. The North Vietnamese have discovered something fundamental. You don't need sophisticated weapons to win a war. You just need enough weapons and the will to use them effectively. Every farmer with a rifle becomes part of a distributed weapons system that we cannot destroy because it is everywhere and nowhere. We bomb their factories, they receive new weapons from Russia and China. We bomb their supply lines, they carry ammunition on bicycles. We bomb their villages, and the survivors pick up the rifles of the dead. We are fighting a war where technology should give us an insurmountable advantage. Instead, we're discovering that technology's advantages have limits, and we've reached them. He closes the log, exhausted. Tomorrow he'll fly another mission. Tomorrow another aircraft might be hit by another golden BB. Tomorrow another pilot might learn what many have already learned, that the most dangerous enemy isn't always the most sophisticated one. November 1968, Hanoi, North Vietnam. General Vo Nguyen Giap stands on a reviewing platform watching militia units march past in celebration of the partial bombing halt announced by President Johnson. Among them are farmers, factory workers, teachers, ordinary people who have spent years pointing rifles at the sky. Beside him, Colonel Dang Van Quang, the statistician who first calculated the mathematics of mass small arms fire, holds a leather folder containing the final analysis. General, Dang says, the numbers are final. Over the course of Rolling Thunder, our people fired an estimated 1.8 billion rounds of small arms ammunition at American aircraft. 1.8 billion, Giap repeats, savoring the number. And how many aircraft did we bring down? Confirmed kills from small arms fire alone, 323 aircraft. Probable additional kills where small arms contributed to losses attributed to other causes, perhaps 150 more. Giap does the mental calculation. So, approximately 3.8 million bullets per aircraft destroyed. That seems inefficient. On the surface, yes, Dang agrees. But consider, each bullet cost approximately 10 cents. Each American aircraft cost between $2 and $8 million. The economic exchange ratio strongly favored us. And the human cost? Dang's expression darkens. We estimate 15,000 civilian casualties among militia forces from American bombing and strafing of villages. But those same militia forces tied down American airpower, forced them to fly low and predictably, created an environment where their sophisticated technology became a liability rather than an advantage. Giap watches a unit of elderly men march past, their rifles held at shoulder arms. Some of those rifles are older than the men carrying them. You know what we proved, Colonel? We proved that determination matters more than technology. That will is more powerful than machinery. That an entire people, armed with simple weapons and the knowledge of how to use them effectively, can contest the sky itself. The Americans call it the golden BB phenomenon, Dang says. They treat it as bad luck, random chance. There is nothing random about firing 1.8 billion bullets, Giap replies. That is not chance. That is certainty. When you fire enough bullets, probability becomes destiny. At December 1972, Linebacker 2, the Christmas bombing, Hanoi. 4 years after Rolling Thunder ended, the bombing has resumed. Captain Thomas Moe guides his F-4 Phantom through the night sky above Hanoi, watching B-52s drop their payloads from 30,000 feet. The Americans have learned they're flying higher now, using different tactics, employing sophisticated electronic warfare, but some things haven't changed. As Moe descends to provide cover for a damaged B-52, he sees them again. The muzzle flashes from the ground, thousands of them, creating a dome of fire over the city. The militia hasn't gone anywhere. They've been waiting, training, preparing for this moment. Dragon lead, this is Dragon 3, his wingman calls. I'm taking hits, multiple systems failing. Moe looks over, sees the other F-4 trailing smoke. Dragon 3, what's your status? I'm not going to make it out, lead. Hydraulics are gone, engine temps rising. I'm punching out. Another golden BB, another aircraft brought down by weapons that shouldn't be able to touch them. Except they can, and they do, because the North Vietnamese never forgot the lesson. Fire enough bullets, and eventually one finds its mark. March 1973, Clark Air Base, Philippines. Major James Stockdale, now a returning POW after nearly 8 years of captivity, steps off the C-141 transport into the Philippine sunlight. Cameras flash. Crowds cheer. He's a hero, a symbol of American resilience and courage. But as he stands at attention during the ceremony, all he can think about is that day in December 1965 when he first heard the sound of bullets hitting his aircraft. Tink, tink, tink. The beginning of everything that followed. The ejection, the capture, the torture, the years in Hoa Lo prison. A single bullet from a farmer's rifle changing the course of his life. He's not bitter about it. He's not angry. He's just struck by the profound irony that the most sophisticated military in the world, with the most advanced technology and the best trained pilots, was brought to its knees in part by people with weapons from another era who understood something fundamental about warfare. Numbers matter. Will matters. And sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one. 1985, U.S. Air Force Tactical Fighter Weapons Center, Nellis AFB, Nevada. Colonel Robin Olds, now retired, stands before a class of young fighter pilots teaching the lessons of Vietnam. On the screen behind him, a photograph of an F-105 riddled with bullet holes still somehow flying. "Gentlemen," Olds says, "I'm going to tell you about something we called the Golden BB. It's the idea that one bullet, randomly fired from a simple rifle, can bring down the most sophisticated aircraft in your inventory. You might think this is about luck. It's not. It's about mathematics." He advances to the next slide, statistical analysis of aircraft losses in Vietnam. The North Vietnamese understood something we didn't, that if you fire enough bullets, probability becomes certainty. They armed their entire population, millions of people, and trained them to fire coordinated volleys at likely flight paths. Most bullets missed, but some didn't. And over time, those hits added up to 323 confirmed aircraft destroyed by small arms fire alone. A young lieutenant raises his hand. "Sir, doesn't our modern technology make us immune to that threat?" "Does it?" Olds challenges. "Your F-16 still needs hydraulic pressure to fly, still needs fuel that doesn't leak, still has control surfaces that can be damaged. A bullet doesn't care about your radar or your weapon system or your speed. A bullet only cares about hitting something important, and if enough bullets are fired, one of them will." He pauses, lets the lesson sink in. The Golden BB isn't just about Vietnam. It's about understanding that every technological advantage has a vulnerability, that determined adversaries will find ways to exploit those vulnerabilities, and that the most dangerous enemy is often the one you underestimate. Another slide. A simple rifle next to an F-105 with the caption, "Cost ratio 1/100,000. We lost that war for many reasons," Olds continues. "But one reason was that we believed technology would save us. We believed that our sophisticated aircraft and weapons made us invincible. The North Vietnamese taught us otherwise. They taught us that a $30 rifle in the hands of someone willing to use it can defeat an $8 million fighter jet." He looks at each young pilot in turn. "Don't ever forget that lesson. Don't ever underestimate an enemy because their weapons look primitive. Because the most sophisticated weapon system in the world means nothing if a single bullet can bring it down." Yo, present day, National Museum of the United States Air Force, Wright-Patterson, AFB, Ohio. An elderly Vietnamese woman stands before a display case containing an F-105 Thunderchiefs canopy, the plexiglass starred with bullet holes. Nguyen Thi Mai is 93 years old now, visiting America for the first time to see her grandchildren, who emigrated after the war. She stares at the canopy for a long time, remembering. She remembers standing in rice paddies with an old rifle. She remembers the sound of jets overhead, the sound of her village bell ringing alarm. She remembers firing into the sky, leading the targets, trusting the training. She remembers the Americans who fell, some dead, some captured, all victims of a war that should never have been fought. Her grandson, born in California and serving now as an Air Force pilot himself, stands beside her. "Grandmother," he says gently, were you one of the ones who shot at these aircraft?" She nods slowly. "Yes, many times. We all did." "Did you ever hit one?" "I don't know. We never knew. We just fired and sometimes aircraft fell. We couldn't tell whose bullet made the difference." She reaches out, almost touching the starred canopy, then pulls her hand back. "So many young men, American boys, Vietnamese boys, all dying for reasons they didn't understand. The display says this aircraft was hit 127 times before the pilot ejected," her grandson reads. "Small arms fire. They called it the Golden BB phenomenon." "Golden," she repeats softly. "There was nothing golden about it. Just lead and death and waste." She turns away from the display. "We won the war, but I don't know if anyone truly won anything." As they walk away, neither notices the older American man standing nearby, wearing a flight jacket covered in patches. John Dramesi, Captain Dramesi, who ejected over North Vietnam in 1966, has been listening. He approaches the display, looks at the starred canopy, and touches the bullet holes gently. He thinks about his own aircraft, brought down by a bullet from a farmer's rifle. He thinks about the 6 years he spent in Hoa Lo prison. He thinks about the friends who didn't come home. And he thinks about the profound truth that war has a way of making the sophisticated primitive and the primitive sophisticated. That technology means nothing without understanding. That the most expensive machines can be defeated by the simplest weapons, if the people wielding those weapons have the will to use them effectively. The Golden BB wasn't about one bullet or one aircraft or one pilot. It was about an entire nation that refused to be bombed into submission, that turned every citizen into a defender, that understood something the Americans took years to learn. That wars are won not by those with the best technology, but by those willing to pay the highest price for victory.